Good morning. How are you today? I was just telling someone yesterday about one of my plans. One of my first intentions is to have a hostel in this country. I'm not sure where I'm going to have the hostel yet, whether it be here or Bansko. Or I have to maybe even look around another bit, but yeah, maybe even here. Might even start in this hostel here, but then have my own hostel. But I want to have my own hostel, and I want to run it sort of like the Burning Man, where everything is free. I was just thinking last night whether I'd actually charge to stay in it or not. But initially, maybe the charge to stay in it, but maybe to stay in it free. I'm going to do everything free, and I'll just stream the content. But then I'll have, like, for example, a perma garden in it, so where people can watch people growing things and people can explain what they're growing, how they're growing it, what natural pesticides they're using. That's if they are using natural pesticides. And then I'll have an area like I'm going to keep chickens, so I'll have chicken shit for the fertilizer. I'll have eggs for the breakfast. I'll have all these things. But everybody who comes to stay in the hostel has to work. Like, they have to work at something, but I'll find a role for everybody, because this is going to be a microcosm for what I want to do. So I'll find a work for whatever someone's strengths are, whatever they want to do. If they want to do some gardening, if they want to do some beehive keeping, if they want to look after the chickens, if they want to come to the bodybuilder gym and do bodybuilding, that'll be all just perfect. But as long as they're working to do some work that I can stream, and we can teach that work, and we can show other people. And then at night we're going to play music and dance and sing, and yeah, and I'll have co-worker spaces and everything, but everything free, and I'll just stream all the content so that you'll be able to come onto the platform that the hostel is on, and you'll be able to go from one camera to another, maybe even listen in some conversations and say, watch what people are eating, because I'll be doing, to be a camera in the kitchen. Everybody will be able to show what meals they're cooking, what they're eating, why they're eating it. And I'm going to have this whole experience of a free commune that people just have to book in, because if it's free, like, because it'll be like, okay, you have to work a few hours a day, like, whatever, you have to do the gardening, if you mind the chickens, you have to come and do the bodybuilding, you have to do something anyway in the interest of others. You even teach yoga. If you can teach yoga, that'll be brilliant. But we're going to have this sort of a hostel where it's free, and I'll just stream the content, and people can then teach whatever to do, teach the yoga, teach everything, as long as it's conducive to that. It's useful to everybody. I myself might do a little bit of philosophy or something like this. I'll conduct the orchestra. That's what I'm going to do. I'm going to conduct the orchestra. But my intention then is to run it on free electricity. Now, I don't really give too much of a fuck about the environment. I just want to. And the reason for not giving a fuck about the environment is because we were just talking about this yesterday, fella. I was just saying, there is no end. You know what I mean? There is no end. There's no point fearing this end. There is no end. Like, really, like, the universe is infinite. So nature just rebirths itself. But it's just a matter of when. And I rather live than drag it out. You know what I mean? I rather live a reasonable existence rather than like my own death. Like, you know what I mean? I'm very aware of the fact that I'm going to die, but while I'm here, I'm going to live for all I'm fucking worth. And it's the same, like, I think the same collectively, that while we're here, don't restrict our experience, or don't be emotionally manipulated by things that are really of no benefit to the universe. It's just a manner of gaining control. And this is very much gained from people in fear. When people are in fear, they surrender their liberties left, right and centre. But anyway, that's not what this podcast is about. So I want to do free electricity as well, because here in Bulgaria you have these perpetual generators. There's farmers out in fields, and they actually have these perpetual generators, because you can see them on YouTube. It's in Bulgarian language, but if you look for them, you'll still find them. That's people show them to me here. But they have these perpetual generators. Do you know what a perpetual generator is? So you have a big stick or a string on the generator, on the motor, and when that swings around, it gets perpetual motion. So what you need is a small current for this machine that they have manufactured in the sheds and all. There's a few of them on it, but you get a small current. So say something like from a solar panel, you get something like from a solar panel and put it into this machine. And this is enough just to get the perpetual motion going. And then when the perpetual motion gets going, it increases the power up to about 50 to 80%. Now that's just for a start. And then of course, if we're near a river, we can take more electricity off that, because we now have a little device that you can put the little whirlpool down in the river or a stream, and as the water flows through it, of course, the stronger the flow, the more electricity you're going to get. But you can store all this electricity from all little small places, and you can bring them all into a battery which you can use to run your whole hostel for free. But I'm determined about one thing: I'm going to run the hostel on free electricity, and that's for sure. And maybe a wood burning stove then for the winter, or something like this, a wood burning stove for the winter, because there'll be lots of wood where I put it. But our natural stuff like turf, I don't know if we have any turf here, but we must have some turf somewhere. But burn natural things like this. But yeah, and I'm going to run this hostel free, and then of course the streaming then, because I'll stream all the content, like, because I think like it'd be a much better version of Big Brother than Big Brother actually is, because, like, you know, for example, when people want to come and stay, I'd say, well, can you play anything? Can you do anything? Can you teach anything? Can you teach gardening? And of course, if there's a use for them, I'll have to oust those who are of no use and replace them with ones who are of use. The universe retains what's useful, and this is in accordance with nature. So such say someone comes, like, and they're there for a couple of weeks or a month, and they get complacent, well, they can just be subject to replacement. And once people are aware that they're subject to replacement, well, they're not going to get complacent, are they? But if you have a thing where they a unionized thing where they just use it to become complacent and comfortable and of no use to anybody, well, that's not really in the interest of the hostel. It's not in the interest of the foundation either. So yeah, that's the next thing. And then the next big question I have then in relation to this hostel, so that's the hostel, that'd be the first thing we do. But the first question then I was talking about last night in relation to this hostel is whether or not to now allow nudity. Because this is a very contentious issue, and you have to be very careful with this one. And this is what I'm saying, and this is what I'm saying about this acceptance and everything else. That you have to be very careful with this, because tolerance is the lube that inserts the dildo of dysfunction in the ass of society. So you have to be very careful what you tolerate, because you're teaching people how to treat you. But what I'm saying is, rather than form alliances, it's a lot better off to set your own boundaries and be able to say no, or be able to say, you know, I met a couple of women before, like, who very much depend on the law, but when the law is in place and there's all these things regarding sexual harassment and everything else, people tend to rely on this and they don't develop their own coping mechanisms. Like, you should be able, I think every woman should be able to say, you fuck off. And they should be taught to be assertive enough to be able to say to men, fuck off. Do you know what I mean? Fuck off and sit somewhere else. And they need to be able to say, fuck off and sit somewhere else. Rather than, because what I notice a lot of happening is that, well, yes, a lot of the time what happens is when men come on to women and they come on to them being heavy, they invoke a cortisol response in which the woman can't think, especially if she had a few drinks and she's not expecting this, and next thing out of the blue there's an arm around her or an arm on her hand on her leg. It invokes a cortisol response where they have trouble saying no, and they have trouble saying no. Now this is very prominent in the Me Too movement, where people then blame say the man is a predator, he's a predator. Yes, he is a predator. Yes, he is a predator. And there's an awful lot of predators. And that's what we're going to talk about, the predatory nature of man, but we'll talk about that in another podcast. But right now what I want to talk about is the women learning to focus on what is within their control, and to be able in order for to be able to utilize within their control, they have to start learning to adapt and overcome to this cortisol response. And the only way you can overcome this cortisol response is experience it in some manner. Even if you go to Turkey and try out the shops where they try to evoke cortisol response, or you have to have some experience, but you have to have some sort of exposure therapy in which you learn to overcome this cortisol response. And then you have the ability to say, you fuck off and sit somewhere else. Because unless you can develop this thing, you're going to be vulnerable and you're going to be prey, and then you're going to blame well, it's not that I'm not saying anybody's wrong to blame anybody, but well, really, like, well, the truth be known, the wise man blames no one. Because, like, this is just, well, when you get to a certain understanding of nature, you get to understand nature, you get to understand it how it is, and then you get to learn how to mitigate it and how to deal with it. And this is the whole point of philosophy. Learning what you're dealing with, standing back from people, learning what you're dealing with. And that's why I say it has to be more than this just acceptance. There has to be an understanding of exactly the predatory nature of man. There has to be an understanding of the possibilities and capabilities of women. But this understanding takes a lot of undoing of a lot of conditioning, because a patriarchal society has created certain cultures which sort of empower the man as a predatory animal, and more or less yes, have created a culture of where the women are nearly accepted as prey. You know what I mean? Like, but yet, like, the law doesn't really do anything to help this. But I'll come to the law in time. I'll come to address this myself. I was going to tell you an example from the Rainbow Gathering of how it's you have to be very careful with the law and the whole Me Too movement, not to secure not to empower the insecurities of women, because when you empower the insecurities of women rather than teach them to overcome these insecurities, the whole thing turns into a fucking shit show, because everybody becomes neurotic. Everybody's afraid to move on anybody. Everybody's afraid of the ramifications of the law, when the law really what you're doing is you're giving the law too many powers to interfere in your business and to rule your life. You're surrendering your liberties and your freedoms for this nanny state. This nanny state I used to say about in relation to the nightclubs, and I'll say it again about in relation to the hostel. When I'm running a hostel, I'll run it as I see fit. My house, my rules. That's what a German lad said to me one time when I was talking about acceptance. I said, well, would you not accept me as I am now? Would you not accept, like, that this is my nature and accept me as I am? And he said, I have no problem accepting you as you are. But he said, this is my house. Well, he's more or less speaking hypothetically. He said, this is my house and these are my rules. And whereas I have no problem accepting you as you are, fuck off and do it in someone else's house. Do you know what I mean? You have to accept that these are my rules. And this is what was when we were talking about the nudity as well. When I was talking with the Zen Buddhist, he was saying he wasn't allowed into the shop barefoot. He wasn't allowed into the shop barefoot, and I said, well, I walk around barefoot everywhere, and I never have a problem. And he said, well, we can go down together. But there was more than just the barefoot thing. There was the whole thing that he had the arse over his trousers, and he looked like he hadn't washed in 3 or 4 weeks as well, and he had the arse over his trousers as well. So it was sort of a package deal. But he was sort of saying to me that this, I'll come back and talk about the nudity again, but this is just starting with the bare feet. That he was saying, like, that he was imposing his morality on him. And I said, yeah, but you're trying to impose your morality on him. This is the opposite perspective of it. And everybody is a will to power, and that's what it's very important to understand, that this is an instinctual drive, this is a primeval instinct, the will to power. And the whole thing is to identify this will to power, and then ask how this will to power manifests itself in you, and then ask yourself, do you suppress this will to power? But everybody's will to power, and anything that's suppressed will manifest itself in uglier ways. But this is an example of the will to power. Everybody wants to impose their will, and everybody wants to say how it is, how they think it ought to be. But when you learn some strategy, and you learn to think rationally, then you can impose your will in a lot better ways than people currently are. You can do it in a much more calculated fashion. Strategy. Strategy is everything. If Alexander had to ride into battle, or Julius Caesar had to ride into battle with no strategy, they would have just got fucking slaughtered. But to manage to take down much larger armies with smaller armies, to manage to bring down much larger armies with good strategy. You need good strategy. Good morning.